from Alex Potter from Piper Sandler. Please go ahead.
Great, perfect, thanks. Yes, this is Alex Potter, Piper Sandler. Okay, so obviously that NetJets announcement, very interesting. It sounds, I just wanted to clarify, it sounds like this is primarily focused on the United States, so that was my initial impression, is that it's mostly US, but in the video you mentioned Europe a couple times as well. I know NetJets has a presence in Europe. So to what extent is the NetJets partnership global in nature? Is it US and Europe? You know, any comments on the regional focus of that relationship would be helpful.
Morning, Alex. Great question. Seb, you want to take that one, please?
Sure, definitely. And thank you for the question and the opportunity to clarify. It is a global partnership. You know, we intend to look at their fractional market and in a global way. But obviously, as Pat mentioned in the video, the US market will be a good test for us to see how far we can go. But it's meant to be global, and we're confident it will drive us to be global.
Okay, perfect. And then I guess another follow-up on that. My understanding, at least, obviously, if you look at their current fleet, you know, most of the jets that they have are 8, 10, 12 passenger configurations. Most of them are clearly going to be longer than the 100 or so mile routes that the Lilium jet will be flying. So to what extent does this, you know, incorporating the Lilium jet into their business model require them to change their service offering, change their pricing? It obviously is going to be a different product from what they've historically offered. So I'm interested in how they're approaching that.
Great. No, thank you again. I cannot speak for NetJets obviously today. What I can tell you though is that a very high number of flights of small jets actually are flying below 300 kilometers, so you know, something like 200 miles, and therefore there is a need and demand for the first mile and last mile, because some of those aircraft cannot land in all of the places in the world. So we validated the demand, and we feel confident it will be a great add to NetJets offering, and the way they're going to do it, it's for them to talk about.
Okay, perfect.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, that's good. And then maybe a couple questions on the technical side. You mentioned that a fair amount of the engineering spend has been focused on batteries. Presumably that's in partnership with Custom Cells. I'd be interested in hearing about any progress there, I guess, on battery chemistry changes or any other key battery performance metrics. Not sure if battery-related developments were involved in the decision to move down to 30 engines from 36, or I guess any other details you'd be willing to share on either batteries or powertrain would be interesting.
Thanks, Alex. I'll let Daniel take this. I would say that as part of our May 1, the team is going to give a larger battery update as part of our next call, but I'll let Daniel answer the specific question.
Thanks, Alex. That's a great question. So the changes from 36 to 30 engines were not related to the battery. On the battery side, as you know, we have started selecting and testing the silicon anode battery cells in 2020. Since then, we have made a big progress in testing those cells over 2 years. We understand their performance very well, we understand their power very well, and their lifetime. And we are now focused with our partner Custom Cells on the industrialization of these cells, as well as the safety certification of these cells. On the industrialization, we have made great progress with Custom Cells. In fact, very soon we can start production of the first cells on the serial manufacturing line. This is the same line that we would use for the serial manufacturing of the cells. It's the same tools and a fully process controlled and quality managed line, a huge step for the industrialization of our batteries and the prerequisite for certifying these cells. So we are fully on schedule with respect to the batteries, and there's no changes on chemistry or anything else.
Very cool. Okay, so maybe last question, and I'll turn it over. You mentioned in the letter, obviously a lot of interesting new employees added, which is exciting. If you could maybe comment on headcount. I think in a previous call you mentioned you were working toward 1,000 employees or thereabouts. Is that roughly where you're at now, and are there any key job functions that you still need to address? Thanks.
Company is around 800 FTEs. We also have a bit over 100 contractors. So we look at the mix between contractors and FTEs. So I think it's somewhere, if you add those two together, it's between 900 and 1,000. On an absolute basis, I think that it's not a numbers game for us. It's evidenced by, I think, the quality of the people we showed on the page and in previous quarters. All of these developments come down to the quality of the team. So we're always looking at adding bench strength, I would say, and I'll ask, Daniel can confirm this. I think the top of engineering is largely set, but we're always looking to add great talent, particularly filling out the management ranks. But Daniel, why don't you give your thoughts on engineering?
Yeah, I mean, as a CEO, talent is always at the top of my mind. And for this year, talent is not about significant growth. We may see a 10% growth or so in the organization. But as Jeff said, we're continuously adding top talent, especially in the middle ranks of engineering. And this is what we're focused on this year.
Great. Perfect. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for your question. The next question from Colin Rusch from Oppenheimer. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thanks so much, guys. I'd love to get a little bit more detail on what's changing with the engines. Specifically, if you are, looking at higher voltages on how that operates, the RPM for those engines, and then the implications for the next generation design by having a little bit larger engine. Does that simplify the process and the design of that larger aircraft?
I can take
you,
this one. Yeah, I can take this one. So the switch from 36 to 30 engines is really an incremental change. There is no change in the engine design, no change in the technology, no change in the engine voltage or so. What we're doing is basically slightly scaling up the geometry of the engine, but with the same design and parts, the same propeller tip speeds, the same acoustic technologies. So the motivation here is really, as I have laid out, to reduce the complexity, make a simpler aircraft by reducing parts counts, and this is also obviously lowering the maintenance cost and the operating cost of the airplane. It doesn't really change something on the certification side. It's the same means of compliance and the same requirements that we are fulfilling. So we have been thinking about a 30 engine configuration over the last 2 years, but we really now just felt confident in that process to say we now have all the data we need. We've had 3 wind tunnel test campaigns in the last 12 months to confidently make that step and make use of the benefits.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I'm curious about what's going on the business development side. Obviously, you've been able to make a couple of meaningful announcements in the last couple of quarters. But as you look across the field of potential partners and interest level and maturity of those conversations, can you give us an update on where you're at with incremental partners, particularly around some of the freight applications that you guys have talked about as supplementing some of the passenger revenue down the line?
Sure, Jeff, you want me to take this?
Yeah, Seb, why don't you take that, please?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey, of course, and a lot of progress has been made, I have to say. I've joined recently, but I've been in the industry for long. I think people are starting to realize that this is real, that it will change dramatically the way of flying. We're talking to some cities and countries whereby the implementation of our eVTOL will have just a positive impact, in terms of mobility, tremendous impact. So obviously, we're going through the journey of building the aircraft, and people are following what we're doing. But overall, I would say that the maturity of discussions are increasing, and our partners and potential customers we're talking to are very serious about it, and committing to resources, understanding what it takes to operate such an aircraft. And overall, I think we're getting closer and closer to being able to look at that at a much more global footprint.
So, do you want to comment on delivery? I think that was one of Colin's main points.
Say that again?
You want to comment on delivery? I think Colin had asked, what are we seeing on the delivery side?
Delivery side on the aircraft side you talk about. Sorry, I missed
like cargo. I think you said, what are your thoughts around?
Oh, I got it. Cargo. Sorry. Yeah. So this one is a bit more complex. So every single cargo company has slightly different requirements in regards to why they want to do it. But overall, it's still very positive. A lot of discussions with those companies, and we'll see where it leads. But obviously, overall, a big engagement and trying to figure out some of the details of their operation. So quite engaged, and we'll see in the near future.
Great. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you for your question. The next question from Adam Forsyth from Longspur Research. Let's go ahead.
Morning, Adam Forsyth from Longspur Research. A couple of questions, if I may. Just going back to the answer you gave just on motor engine technology. I just wonder, I think I'm right in saying it's a permanent magnet synchronous motor that you're using. Have you ruled out other motor technologies? Obviously now, I think as you said, it's the same technology. Have you ruled out things like actual flow motors in the longer term? And then on the PDR generally, I wonder, have you made any changes on the back of what we've seen in terms of supply chain disruption sort of across the world generally? And do you think you now maybe are in a more robust place for potential disruption going forward? And then just a couple of quick questions on the MOU. Is there any time-up clause on the MOU, or is it a sort of evergreen one? And again, just slight clarification on an answer to an earlier question. The actual fractional ownership model which NetJets has, will that pretty much be the same model that they'll offer? I mean, will the sort of model they're offering on a Falcon be the same one they'll offer on a NetJet aircraft? Thanks.
Okay, that's great questions. Jeff, I can take the first one, and maybe you can take the second. On the motor, yes, I can confirm it's a standard permanent magnet electric machine, which of course we have looked into different designs like axial flux machines and other types of machines. There's two reasons why we in the end took a relatively standard geometry for the motor. One is cost and the supply chain. Again, we have the highest competition in the market for this type of motors. And the second reason is that it fits very well into the cooling concept and geometry of our engine. It's an extremely powerful or power-dense motor still, because it runs at relatively high RPM, and we're using very sophisticated geometries and designs. But in a nutshell, it's a standard permanent magnet motor.
And
Okay. Yeah.
Seb, you want to take the rest? Go ahead.
Yeah, for NetJets, obviously I can't communicate the term of our agreement. However, what's more important is we are currently working hard together to really make it happen. And we have, as we said earlier, several streams. Number one is, how does our aircraft fit into their fractional model? And it seems like it's a great fit, and we're really excited to work together with them, better understanding. Someone mentioned earlier the number of passengers. I can't comment on these, are confidential data, but our aircraft capability and capacity actually fits very well with most of their travels. So anyway, back to fractional. Number two is private sales. So this is really important as well, right? We're going to be serving private individuals, and all aircraft will have to be managed by a Part 135 operator or 145 for maintenance. But this is a second big pillar, how we're going to be selling to private individuals. And lastly, we see that as a great opportunity as well to make our Florida network even more real with an operator looking at the flight ops side of our business there, along with, like you said earlier, the partnership on the infrastructure side. So really complementary, I would say, work streams, and we're working hard together with both teams right now to make it a success.
And Adam, for me, what's really important about this deal is the concept that if you look at their customer base, they're early adopters, and they have an ability to pay. So you combine those two things, there's a lot of ways to work together and deploy those. But if you take it up a level and look at how industries typically roll out their customer base, who are the early adopters is quite important, and we've aligned that we agree that their customer base are likely early adopters for this type of product.
Sure. That's really helpful. Just that other question, just on the PDR and impact on and influence of supply chain issues, and particularly supply chain potential disruption.
Yeah, I think that we're very aware of the disruptions. I wouldn't necessarily say that the outcome of PDR is to change designs based on current supply chains, but the team has been very focused since last year and aware of it. So as we go through the PDR process, any limitations or kind of difficulties in the supply chain are getting factored into the process. I don't think design changes are happening to address a short-term market imbalance, but as we go forward, whether it's through volumes, through contracting, through NRCs, there's a huge amount of supply chain activity. This is one of the topics we'll be in a position to give you a deeper dive. We'd like to do that on the May call because I think we're seeing more visibility, but I think that the team has been working very hard on this, and I think in the last call we had updated that we'd added a new head of supply chain who was very senior from Airbus and BMW. So we've also spent a lot of time adding talent to this team, particularly because of the current situation in the market.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for your question. The last question is from David Zazula from Barclays.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. Maybe for Daniel or Sebastian, you gave some criteria that you would be using to address the type of configuration you'd go on to the launch market. I know you'll give more color on this in May, but can you maybe give a little more detail on the criteria you'll be using and how you're evaluating that? And specifically whether you're thinking, right now maybe launching one configuration before the other in the 2024 launch time?
Daniel, want to take it, or you want to take it?
I can take it. I can start, and maybe you can add to it. So, from the technical perspective, this is really a flexible cabin. So we're deliberately designing the aircraft, and this is part of the PDR process outcomes here. We're really designing the aircraft to be able to accommodate all different types of cabin configurations. So in the end, it really boils down to the demand of the customers and the different segments. We think that as early adopters on the fractional ownership side, especially, this is a great market and business model to start with. But I would maybe hand over to you, Sebastian, to say a couple of words on the demand side.
Yeah, well, actually, on the demand, we've seen obviously both. People that cares more about higher capacity and high frequency routes, and we've seen others that are more into replacing helicopters, more premium. So if you're asking me in what order we're going to be starting delivering the aircraft, I can't give you that answer yet. But it will probably be a combination of both configurations. As Daniel said, we have a smart design in the cabin, and we're not afraid of being able to deliver the aircraft in either order.
David, does that answer the question?
That does. Specific to the configuration, is it envisioned that the configurations would be roughly similar payload size for the 4 or the 6?
On the pilot side?
He said payload.
Like how much weight you would...
Oh, wait, sorry, payload.
The configurations can have different payload capabilities. So they would not all have the same payload necessarily, depending on what you're adding in the cabin and what configuration you choose in the cabin.
Okay, great. And then if I get one follow-up, you had a competitor announce a launch and a certification process in the Brazil market. You already have an existing agreement in that market. Can you just discuss how your certification process is expected to develop there, and how your assessment of the market and whether it can support multiple entrants?
Yeah, Daniel, you want? Okay, wait, I'll start. As you know, we're going to be in the EASA, territory, and we'll have the FAA certification as well, and therefore, we're going to be able to go outside quickly to any countries in the world that people are accepting EASA type of certification. So we are obviously engaged with our partner Azul and with the authorities over there, and we'll see how it develops. But I think Brazil has a huge market, and probably there is enough room for 2, right? So all I can tell you is it's going well. We're engaged, authorities are engaged, and we see that market being quite interesting for us.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, Daniel.
I think we have 2 minutes. We received a number of questions from our retail engagement platform. We saw a lot of engagement, and they voted up. I think we have time for probably 2 quick questions. Daniel, why don't we give you, when can we expect an update on the progress of key flight tests such as max speed and max range validation tests?
So on the flight testing side, as I mentioned before, we have just freshly brought the demonstrator to Spain, and in the Spanish flight test area, we have the big advantage that it's an uninhabited environment where we can do longer flights, we can do faster flights, we can, in the future, if necessary, fly beyond visual line of sight. So we're starting this flight test campaign now, and we have as a target for this campaign in the next steps to do the full transition flight and then continue into high-speed flying. And then in summer, we will add another aircraft to this test campaign. So we're going to have a higher pace in the testing of our technologies and of our airplanes. And we'll obviously keep you updated on any progress in the flight test campaign. I think it will be very exciting. It's, for me, always the most exciting thing to see the aircraft flying.
Okay, thanks.